This is Drew with Boomer Music Company, your band and orchestra experts since 1976. So we had a request for a video, specifically orchestra related, which is fantastic because I feel like we focus on band way too much. And it was about beginners have challenges when they haven't got the experience with their instrument, how to take care of it, and what to look for, and just general messing with it outside of class. And I thought that was a really worthy topic, but I'm not an expert in orchestra. But Sarah Doddridge is. She is an experienced teacher and one of our string technicians here. So I thought, who better to guide us through this topic than Sarah? So, Sarah, what do you got for us?
Hi, so I'm just going to kind of walk you through some problems that you might see at home with your instrument when your teacher's not there to help you kind of troubleshoot and fix things that might be going on, and see if I can give you some tips that might help you get back to playing at home. So first, the most common things I see, I think, are pegs slipping and bridges being crooked or falling down, things like that definitely will stop you from playing almost instantly. So pegs slipping, I think, is something that you can do at home. I would check with your teacher first and make sure that you have permission to do that in case there's something that they want to teach you first. So I'm just going to show you the way that I like to approach fixing your peg if your peg slips. So first of all, what that looks like is I have a viola here. So I'm going to look at the D string. That's really nice. And sometimes you'll hear that, right? And so you'll be playing the D string, can't hear it, nothing's happening. The string's really loose like that. So don't worry, nothing's broken. All you need to do is turn the peg and get it tightened back up. So if it's really loose like this, the first thing I like to do is just kind of pull the string so that it's tight. And the only thing to be careful with here is that you are using a tuner, because if you go too far, you're going to break your string. So I'm going to tighten it enough. I've got my tuner right here. And there I've got a little bit of a pitch. I can see right now it says that I'm on G. And for this viola, I need to go up to D. So as I'm plucking, the whole time I'm using the tuner, turning that peg until I get to D. There you can see it on the tuner. And then you have to kind of push it in there harder than you think you do. A lot of times people are afraid to really get the peg to stick, and then it'll just slip right again. And then there I'm close enough. Now you can just use your fine tuner. Plucking the whole time, making sure that I'm not going over, because again, it's so easy to break a string. And this is why your teacher can be really helpful with this and even show you how to do it at first, because the first time you do it, you're most likely going to break a string.
So breaking a string, is that something that's like totally freak out worthy, or is it time to quit the viola?
No, absolutely not. It may be scary. It makes a really loud popping noise, and sometimes other things can break if the string breaks, but it's a really easy fix, and all you need to do is take it to your teacher, your local music store. They can get you a new string and put it on for you.
And I know some teachers recommend having a spare set of strings in the case. That can get a little pricey. What I've tended to recommend is, in the case of a viola, the A string, or in the case of violin, the E string, because those are the thinnest and going to break the soonest. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. It's a great idea to have an extra set of strings in your case for emergencies, and especially if you have a concert coming up, because it's really, really scary and sad if you have a concert like in an hour and all of a sudden your string breaks, music stores are closed, and you're out of luck and you have your concert. So keeping an extra set of strings is a really good idea. I personally keep an old set of strings in my case. So if something breaks, I'll put the old string on just as for like one day to get me through whatever's happening, and then go buy a new string or a new set of strings the next day.
That's a great tip. Yeah, save those old strings, because there's emergency life left in them yet. It's like a spare tire on a car.
Exactly.
Cool. So what other tips do you have for our beginners?
So the other thing that I see most often is bridges either being crooked or falling down. Now, this is something that when I used to teach, I used to ask my students just to notice. take a look at your viola, your violin, your cello, your bass. Look at it every now and then. Notice if something's crooked. Notice if something's broken. Notice if something's a little bit weird compared to how it normally looks. Your bridge should be perpendicular with the back side of your violin. It makes a right angle here. So if you notice that your bridge, for instance, may look like this, that's not good. Or the more common one that we see is where it's leaning forward like this. And maybe that's a little bit extreme, but it can happen where you're playing and your bridge will get like that. And that just happens because the strings, the more you tune them, the strings just pull the bridge forward. And it's not a big deal, but if it falls, that can cause more damage. So what you're doing is you're just noticing. Say my bridge looks like that. Immediately you take it into your teacher and you say, can you fix my bridge? And it's a super quick fix that your teacher can do, and then your instrument's good as new. If you want to try to fix this yourself, if you're not going to see your teacher for a week or two, you can just be very careful and really support the bridge, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But everything is extremely fragile, as you probably know. So if it drops, if it falls, it could break the bridge, crack your instrument. So just be very careful. What I like to do is hold the bridge from either side like this, and just very, very, very slowly put it back straight up like that. And that takes a little bit of practice. But in a pinch, and especially if you're not going to see your teacher for a couple days, you'll get the hang of it. And so then I'm going, checking it to make sure it's flat. And there we go. We're back to where it goes. Then another thing is your bridge can be off center. So that's another easy fix that your teacher can do or show you how to do. And I'm using the same grip. I'm holding the bridge by both sides right here, supporting it so it's not going to break or fly off. But see how this string is way closer to the edge than this one. So that's also not going to work, and you might get some buzzing there as well. So I'm going to take the bridge and just scooch it over so it's back center. And again, that's probably something that your teacher can do, and if all you do is notice that it's crooked, that's great. Bring it to your teacher and they can put it back. Because like I said, it's very fragile and it's very possible that you'll break it if you try to mess with it and fix it. The other thing I say with your bridge that I see sometimes is it is not glued down. And a lot of times we get instruments in here that the bridge has been glued on, backwards, taped on, all these weird stuff. It's held on purely by the tension of the string. So if it falls off, please don't glue it, because that's a lot more work to fix the instrument than just moving it back with your hands.
Yeah, that was something that struck me being a band kid, that the bridge is just tensioned on there. There's nothing about it that's holding it on other than the string, so I always thought that was kind of a funny thing. And funny story, a store I used to work at back on Long Island, we actually got an instrument returned with the bridge upside down. Like literally the feet up in the air, the strings laid over it and tensioned. I still don't know how they managed to do that. I've tried to recreate it. It's almost impossible. So bridges falling down, scary or not scary?
Very scary. Almost the scariest. And they make a really loud noise as well. Kind of scarier than breaking a string, because you'll hear the bridge hit the instrument. And it can, worst case scenario is that it cracks the top of your instrument. Total worst case scenario. A lot of times if the bridge falls down, it'll just crack in half. The bridge will break. In that case, you do need to take it in and get a new bridge from your local music store. Sometimes it'll just fall down and then you can just put it back up again. But that's something that I would leave to your teacher to do, because it has to go on in a very specific direction and very specific place on your instrument.
And I've had a case where I've had a bridge fall down and all of a sudden there's something rattling inside the instrument. What's that all about?
Yes, that is your sound post. If you've never looked inside your instrument before, you have a sound post that is, if you look through the F-hole, so your sound post is right there on the inside of your violin underneath the bridge. It's in a very specific spot that helps the violin resonate in the proper way. If that falls down, a lot of different things could go wrong. But if you catch it right away, you're good to go. So what that sounds like in your instrument, and I have another violin with the sound post down. Can you hear that rolling around in there? rattling. So if you hear that sound, that's when you need to take it into your music store, because that sound post needs to be first retrieved and then put up back in the right spot.
And we've actually done a separate video on that starring Brad that shows about what a sound post setter is and how that works. So if you're interested in the ins and outs of that process, look for that on the Boomer YouTube channel.
Yes, it's a very specific thing. If that's not on there, the first thing you can do is loosen your strings using the pegs. So just how we were doing before, just loosen them maybe like a quarter turn each. That way you take all the tension off, because what happens is the bridge starts to sink in through the top. And then you'll have it in a great spot to take it in your music store and get the sound post reset.
Cool. So what other tips do you have?
The only other thing that really you can look for and notice about your instrument is cracks and open seams. So cracks are pretty obvious. If there's any sort of break in the wood or you hear buzzing, sometimes that can indicate a crack, but sometimes they're less obvious. This one has a crack right here. And when I feel that, it's not smooth. And so that's how I know that's a crack. This one also has an open seam. And the top or the back will come apart from the sides. You can see it kind of opening there. And when I squeeze it, you can see it moving. You can also hear this versus a seam that's not open. So if you've got a sound like that, and I'm just knocking really lightly on the side, that means you have an open seam. And it's best to catch those earlier rather than later, so that way we can put the instrument back together and it'll be a lot nicer sounding for you.
And so you'd use just some Elmer's or some wood glue for that?
I wish. No, there's also a very specialized type of glue that we use. It's called hide glue for the edges. And if you use a different type of glue, chances are it will crack your instrument later on in its life. So the idea is the glue that we use is meant to release eventually, and then your instrument won't crack. So don't use any sort of super glue, Elmer's glue, no wood glue especially. If anything cracks, take it in right away. That's not a repair that you should be trying to do at home.
And the thing that I've seen people not understand is when the seam releases, that's a good thing.
It is, yeah. It means that your instrument is moving. It's wood, so it's shrinking and expanding every time the temperature or humidity changes. So if your seam is open, that means that your instrument needed to expand. It released. Instead of, if it wouldn't have opened the seam, it would have cracked the top of your instrument. So that's a lot easier and less sound impacting repair than it would be if the instrument itself cracked.
So what tips do you have for us about the bow?
So your bow, your teacher would have walked you through this already. When you take the bow out of your case, the first thing you do is tighten it. So what I like to do is tighten it until I can fit about my pinky right through the center. So if you go more than that, I'll show you what it looks like. Okay. Notice how the bow now looks kind of, with my kiddos, I used to call it a sad face. The bow stick is making a sad face, an arch like this. That's not what you want. That's way too much pressure, and your bow could break like this. So we go back to, and notice when it's like that, this is still too tight, how my pinky just kind of goes right through. Then if I tighten it back to where we want it, pinky just barely can go in there, and notice the bow stick is making a smile. So that's how tight you want your bow. The most common thing I see with beginners is that their bow is too tight, and you'll get bouncing, and it could eventually wear out the bow hairs, break your bow stick, all sorts of things.
And so then what do you do when you're done playing?
So when you're done playing, you do need to loosen the bow. If it stays tightened, it will eventually break the tip, or you could lose a lot of bow hairs. So I loosen it until you can see the hair kind of wiggling like that. See, it's not really taut anymore, and it's just barely touching the bow stick there in the middle. The other thing I see a lot with bows is over or under rosining. And people will bring me their bow and say, oh, this bow doesn't work, it's broken. And it may just be because it doesn't have enough rosin on it. Okay, so I want to show you what it sounds like if the bow has no rosin on it whatsoever. And this you'll find happens when you have a brand new bow. Okay, so hear that? No, you don't. Exactly. So, no rosin on that bow whatsoever. Your bow is not broken. You just need to do what I call some scrubbing. Your bow's not broken. You just need to do some scrubbing. Getting your bow full of rosin. Sometimes I see people scratch their rosin. I don't think that that's 100% necessary. Once you get it started, it's good to go. So I'm taking my cake of rosin. You can see there are no scratches. And I'm just going to scrub almost every inch of the bow like this. And I would do this all the way up to the tip, so that way, this is just to get it started. This is when you have a brand new bow. That way you get a fresh amount of rosin on here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you what it sounds like. Okay, so I spent about a minute, just scrubbed every inch of the bow all the way up to the top, and now it should have a starter amount of rosin on it. And remember, that's only when you have no rosin on your bow whatsoever. It's brand new. Then you get a sound like an actual viola. Much better. And my rule for rosining for me, there's a lot of different opinions on this, so your teacher might have a different rule, so you follow whatever your teacher says. For me personally, I rosin every other time that I play, and I only do about 3 or 4 passes. So we're no longer scrubbing. We're going to do long passes like this, 2, 3, 4. And that's it. That's all you need for 1 or 2 days of playing. It's also a great way to practice your bow hold if you're working on that right now as a 6th grader. So that's it. Then I'm good. I can play. And then at the end of my playing, I'm going to loosen my bow like we already talked about. And now it's ready to put away.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your knowledge and expertise, and hopefully you all got some useful information out of this and will be able to take care of your instrument and enjoy orchestra.
If you need help with instruments, repairs, sheet music, or anything band or orchestra, reach out to us at boomermusiccompany.com. And if you like what you hear, do me a favor and tell a friend. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, and subscribe to our e-newsletter so you will never miss another video or podcast. This is Drew with Boomer Music Company. Thank you for listening.